They judged her by her appearance, but they had no idea who she really was. Sarah Miller stood behind the counter, wiping down the polished wooden bar with the same meticulous care she had every day. To the world, she was just another waitress in a busy Manhattan restaurant, but what they didn't know was that she had once lived a completely different life. The hustle and bustle of the high-end eatery never fazed her. She had learned to keep a calm exterior no matter how challenging things got. Today, however, was different. Mark Turner, the CEO of one of the largest tech companies in the world, had just walked in with a group of investors. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that screamed wealth and power. His sharp, icy blue eyes scanned the room, dismissing everyone in his path as if they were nothing more than background noise. Sarah had seen men like him before, but something about his presence made her pause. She was used to being judged for her appearance, but she never let it affect her. She had learned to keep her thoughts to herself and focus on the job at hand. As she walked past his table, one of his colleagues, a man with a smug look on his face, sneered at her. "Can I get a glass of water, sweetheart?" he asked condescendingly. Sarah flashed him a polite smile, but inside, she couldn't help the knot of frustration tightening in her chest. She had worked here for 3 years, and this was not the first time someone had treated her like she was invisible. But today, she wouldn't let it slide. She bent down to grab the water pitcher, her hands steady despite the irritation bubbling under the surface. "Of course, sir," she said in a tone that was professional but laced with an unspoken challenge. She returned to the table, pouring the water with practiced grace, her fingers brushing the edge of the glass just slightly. The man raised an eyebrow, seemingly taken aback by her composure. He didn't expect her to have any backbone, especially not after the way he'd spoken to her. But before he could say anything else, Mark Turner looked up from his phone, his gaze locking with hers. For a moment, Sarah froze. She had seen that look before, the cold, calculating eyes of someone who saw everything, who never missed a detail. "Is everything to your liking, sir?" she asked, her voice smooth but tinged with curiosity. Mark didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied her, as if trying to figure something out. "What's your name?" he asked, his tone unexpectedly soft. Sarah hesitated. Most people didn't bother asking for her name. "Sarah," she replied, keeping her eyes on the table. "Sarah Miller." He nodded thoughtfully, then returned his attention to the conversation with his colleagues. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. As the night wore on, she continued to serve the table, her mind racing. There was something about Mark Turner that unsettled her. Maybe it was the way he carried himself, or the way his eyes seemed to pierce through her. But what she didn't know was that Mark had noticed her in a way that no one ever had before. He was intrigued, but he wasn't sure why. By the end of the night, after the group had finished their meal, Mark left a generous tip, more than she had ever received in her 3 years working there. Sarah was stunned as she counted the bills, but there was something else, something she hadn't expected. As she turned to walk away, she noticed a small piece of paper with a name and number scrawled across it, left under the tip. "Call me," the note read. "I think you, and I need to talk." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what this could mean, but she was certain of one thing. Her life was about to change forever. The next morning, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the note Mark Turner had left her. She had never expected anything like that in her life. She had worked in this restaurant for years, seen countless rich people come and go, but none had ever left her with a personal note like that. She had taken it home with her last night, keeping it hidden in her purse, unsure of what to do with it. It wasn't like her to get involved with people like him, people who had power, who played by different rules. But something about Mark's eyes, the way he had looked at her, made her question everything. Sarah spent the morning running through the possible scenarios in her head. What could he want? Was he just playing a game? Or was there something more? She couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, that something bigger than just a chance encounter was unfolding. As she walked to work that afternoon, the weight of the note seemed heavier in her pocket with each step. When she arrived at the restaurant, the usual routine kicked in. She put on her apron, adjusted her name tag, and slipped into her section. But there was a different kind of energy in the air today, something she couldn't ignore. The restaurant was busier than usual, the clinking of glasses and hum of conversation louder than normal. As Sarah moved between tables, her mind kept wandering back to Mark. She had barely noticed when he walked in again, but she saw him now, sitting at the same table with a new group of colleagues. His sharp, confident gaze swept over the room, and as their eyes met across the crowded restaurant, Sarah felt a jolt of recognition. Mark smiled, a small but knowing smile, and she quickly looked away, feeling a strange flutter in her chest. Was he watching her again? She could feel his eyes on her even as she served the other guests, trying to focus on her work. It was difficult not to be distracted by his presence. After all, he was a billionaire CEO, someone who could have anyone he wanted. Sarah couldn't understand why he was so interested in her. She was just a waitress, nothing special. As the night wore on, Mark's group finished their meal. Sarah made her way over to their table, her heart beating faster with each step. When she reached them, Mark was the first to speak. "Sarah," he said, his voice warm but with a hint of curiosity. "I've been thinking about what you said last night. You seem different from the usual crowd I meet." Sarah froze, unsure of how to respond. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. Mark leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving hers. "There's something about you," he said. "I've never met anyone who doesn't care about money, about status. You don't seem to be trying to impress anyone, and I respect that." Sarah was taken aback by his words. It wasn't every day that a billionaire CEO complimented a waitress like her. She had no idea how to react. Before she could say anything, Mark reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. "Call me," he said, sliding the card across the table. "I'd like to talk to you more. There's something I think you could help me with." Sarah hesitated for a moment, staring at the card. It felt like an impossible decision. But despite the doubts in her mind, she knew one thing for sure. This was no ordinary encounter. It felt like the beginning of something much bigger than she could have imagined. The next day, Sarah couldn't get the conversation with Mark out of her head. She had spent the entire evening contemplating whether or not to call him. She had never been the type to take risks, to step out of her comfort zone. But something about his words, the way he looked at her, made her wonder if this was the moment that could change everything. When she finished her shift that evening, she found herself standing outside the restaurant, her phone in her hand, the business card Mark had given her staring up at her from the screen. It took a few deep breaths before she finally pressed the numbers and dialed. It rang twice before a calm voice answered. "Hello." Mark's voice sent a slight shiver down her spine. "Hi, this is Sarah Miller," she said, trying to sound confident. "I'm returning your call." There was a brief pause on the other end. "Sarah," Mark said, his voice smooth. "I'm glad you called. I've been thinking about you." Sarah swallowed, unsure how to respond. "I don't know why you're interested in talking to me," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I'm just a waitress. I don't have anything special to offer." Mark's chuckle came through the phone, warm and reassuring. "That's the thing, Sarah," he said. "You're not just a waitress. You've got something more, and I think we can help each other." Sarah felt a flutter in her chest. "Help each other?" she repeated, her mind racing. "How?" Mark's tone grew serious. "I run a company," he said, "and I've been looking for someone with your skill set, someone who can think outside the box, someone who isn't just following the rules. I think you have that in you." Sarah was stunned. "I don't have a business degree," she said, her voice soft. "I don't even know what you mean by thinking outside the box. I'm just doing my job." There was a moment of silence on the other end. "You're more than your job, Sarah," Mark said gently. "You've got the kind of intelligence that can't be measured by a degree or a job title. You see things that others don't. That's exactly what I need." Sarah's mind was spinning. She had never thought of herself like that. To her, she was just someone trying to make ends meet, someone who showed up every day and did the work. But Mark was seeing something in her that she had never seen in herself. "I don't know if I'm the right person," Sarah said, her voice hesitant. "I've never done anything like this." "That's exactly why I'm calling you," Mark replied, his tone firm but kind. "You don't need to have done anything like this before. I just need someone with the right mindset, someone who can learn and adapt quickly. I think you can be that person." Sarah stood there for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. She had always believed that her place was here, in this restaurant, waiting on tables. But Mark's words made her wonder if there was more for her, if she could be more than just a waitress. "What are you asking me to do?" she asked, her voice quiet. "Come meet me," Mark said. "I'd like to talk about a business opportunity, something that could change everything for you." Sarah took a deep breath. This was it, the moment where everything could change. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she couldn't let this chance slip away. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "I'll meet you." Mark's voice softened with a smile. "I knew you'd say yes," he said. "I'll send you the details." As Sarah ended the call and slipped her phone back into her pocket, she couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and fear. She had no idea what was coming next, but she knew one thing for sure. This was the start of something new, something that could take her life in a direction she had never imagined. The following day, Sarah arrived at the address Mark had sent her, her heart pounding in her chest. The building in front of her was nothing like the small, modest apartment she called home. It was sleek, modern, and intimidating, with glass windows that reflected the bright midday sun. She paused for a moment, standing on the sidewalk, taking in the surroundings. It felt surreal. She had never imagined herself stepping into a place like this, let alone having a meeting with someone like Mark Turner. Taking a deep breath, she walked into the building, her heels clicking on the polished marble floor. She was greeted by a receptionist who led her to an elevator that took her up to the top floor. As the doors opened, Sarah stepped out into a spacious office, with floor-to-ceiling windows that gave a panoramic view of the city below. Mark was standing by his desk, looking as composed as ever. He smiled when he saw her, the same knowing smile from the restaurant. "Sarah," he said, standing up. "I'm glad you could make it." His tone was warm, but there was still that air of confidence that made her feel like she was stepping into a world she didn't fully understand. "Thank you for inviting me," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Mark gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please have a seat." Sarah sat down, her hands folded in her lap. "I wasn't sure what to expect," she admitted. "I mean, I've never done anything like this before." Mark smiled again, his eyes twinkling with something almost secretive. "That's exactly why I called you. You don't need experience, Sarah. You need potential. And I see that in you." He leaned forward slightly, folding his hands on the desk. "I run a company that's always looking for fresh perspectives, new ideas. People who are willing to think differently. People who aren't afraid to take risks." Sarah listened, trying to make sense of it all. "But I'm just a waitress," she said quietly. "I've never even been to business school." Mark's gaze softened. "It's not about business school, Sarah. It's about what you can bring to the table. I've seen something in you, something that tells me you could be more than what you are right now. This meeting, this opportunity, it's about helping you realize that." Sarah's mind was racing. She had never thought of herself as someone with potential. She had always just tried to get by, paying the bills, taking care of herself. But now, sitting in front of Mark, hearing his words, she began to wonder, what if she was capable of more? What if there was a chance for her to change her life? "What exactly are you asking me to do?" she asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Mark leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk. "I want you to come work for me. Not as a waitress, not in the role you're used to. I want you to join my team and work on projects that could change the future of my company. You'll be learning on the job, but I believe you have what it takes." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "Work for you," she repeated, almost unable to believe it. "You're asking me to leave everything behind?" Mark nodded, his expression serious. "Yes, I'm asking you to take a chance. You've been stuck in a role that doesn't challenge you, that doesn't let you reach your full potential. But you could do so much more, Sarah. I believe that." Sarah sat in stunned silence. She had never considered the possibility of something like this. She had always accepted her life as it was, never questioning if there was more out there for her. And now here was Mark Turner, offering her a way out, a way to change everything. But could she really do it? Could she take that leap? I don't know, she said, her voice quiet. It's a lot to take in. Mark's smile returned, gentle but persistent. I understand. Take your time to think it over. But just know that this opportunity won't last forever. The decision is yours. Sarah stood up slowly, her heart still racing, her mind in turmoil. As she left the office and stepped back into the elevator, she felt as though her world had shifted. She wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. For the next few days, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the offer Mark had made. She walked through the motions at work, serving customers with the same smile, the same routine. But her mind kept drifting back to that moment in his office, when he had looked at her and seen something she had never seen in herself. The idea of working for someone like him, of stepping into a world where she was more than just a waitress, was both exciting and terrifying. What if she failed? What if she wasn't good enough? But what if she was? What if this was her chance to change everything? It was a cold morning when she finally made the decision. She stood in front of her bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection. The same face she had seen every day of her life, the same woman who had always played it safe. But today, she felt different. Today, she saw someone who could take a chance, someone who could step into the unknown and make it her own. She took a deep breath and dialed Mark's number. It rang twice before he answered, his voice as calm and confident as always. Sarah, he said, a hint of warmth in his tone. I'm glad you called. I've thought it over, she said, her voice steady but unsure. And I'm ready to take the leap. I want to work for you. There was a pause on the other end, and for a moment, she wondered if he had changed his mind. But then he spoke, his voice filled with genuine enthusiasm. That's great to hear, he said. I knew you had it in you. I'll send you the details for your first day. It's going to be a big change, but I know you're ready for it. Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had made the right choice. The decision was made, and she was ready to embrace whatever came next. The next week, she found herself walking through the doors of Mark's company, the same nervous excitement bubbling inside her. She was no longer the waitress at a restaurant, no longer the woman who had to hide her dreams. Now, she was stepping into a new world, one where anything was possible. Mark was waiting for her at the entrance, his usual confident demeanor still intact. Welcome aboard, Sarah, he said, shaking her hand. I'm glad to have you here. As they walked through the office, Sarah couldn't help but notice how different it all was. The bright, open spaces, the buzz of conversation, the hum of computers, all of it felt so unfamiliar, yet so thrilling. This was where the real work happened, where people like Mark shaped the future. She was about to be a part of it. As the day went on, Sarah quickly realized that the work would be challenging. But for the first time in a long while, she felt alive. Every task, every meeting, every conversation was an opportunity to prove herself, to show that she could be more than just a waitress. And with every step, she grew more confident. By the end of the week, Sarah had already started to feel like she belonged here. She had earned the respect of her colleagues, and Mark had made it clear that he was impressed with her progress. It wasn't easy, but it was exactly what she had been looking for, something that challenged her, something that made her grow. That night, as she left the office, Sarah couldn't help but smile. She was no longer the woman who had been stuck in the same old routine, afraid to take a risk. She was someone new, someone who had taken a chance and stepped into the future. And she knew, without a doubt, that this was only the beginning. As the weeks passed, Sarah settled into her new role at Mark's company. It was everything she had hoped for and more. The work was demanding, but it pushed her in ways she had never imagined. Every day, she found herself learning something new, tackling challenges she had once thought were beyond her. Mark continued to be a constant presence, guiding her through difficult tasks and encouraging her to think beyond the usual boundaries. His belief in her was contagious, and Sarah quickly began to realize that she was capable of much more than she had ever given herself credit for. But it wasn't just the work that kept her coming back every day. It was the people she worked with, the colleagues who treated her like an equal, the ones who recognized her potential long before she did. They saw past her past the waitress uniform she had worn for so long, and saw the person she was becoming. One evening, after a particularly challenging meeting, Sarah found herself sitting at her desk, staring out the window. The city lights below sparkled like 1,000 tiny stars, and she realized just how far she had come. She had started this journey unsure of herself, afraid to take risks, but now, she felt different. She felt strong, capable, and ready for whatever came next. Mark walked into her office, a small smile on his face. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice warm. "I'm doing great," Sarah replied, standing up and meeting his gaze. "I never thought I'd be here, but now that I am, I don't want to leave." Mark nodded, his expression proud. "I knew you had it in you. It's amazing to see how much you've grown in such a short time." Sarah smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I couldn't have done it without you. You've given me a chance I never thought I'd get." Mark's smile deepened. "You've earned it, Sarah. You've worked hard, and it shows. But this is just the beginning." That night, as Sarah walked home, she felt a sense of fulfillment that she had never known before. The city felt different now, as if the world was wide open, full of possibilities. She had once been afraid to dream big, afraid of failure, but now she knew she was capable of achieving anything she set her mind to. The future was hers to shape, and she was no longer the person who would sit quietly in the background. Sarah had stepped into her own, and there was no turning back. As the days turned into months, Sarah continued to thrive. She took on more responsibility, led important projects, and earned the respect of everyone around her. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a valuable member of Mark's team, someone who contributed ideas that helped shape the future of the company. And through it all, Mark remained her mentor, offering advice and encouragement whenever she needed it. But as Sarah's success grew, so did her confidence. She knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them head-on. She was no longer defined by her past. She was defined by her actions, her determination, and her ability to overcome any obstacle that came her way. As she sat in her office late one night, looking out at the city skyline, Sarah smiled to herself. She had come so far, and yet, she knew this was just the beginning. The future was full of endless possibilities, and she was ready to embrace them all. Months had passed since Sarah made the bold decision to work for Mark, and with each passing day, she found herself more entrenched in the world she had once thought was beyond her reach. The work had grown more intense, the stakes higher, but she thrived under pressure. What had once seemed intimidating now felt like the natural rhythm of her life. She no longer just worked at the company. She was a core part of it, trusted with significant projects, and relied upon for her sharp mind and innovative ideas. Yet, despite her growing confidence and success, there were moments when she found herself thinking back to the life she had left behind, the days of waiting tables, of wondering if her dreams would ever come true. Those days felt like a distant memory, but they had shaped her in ways she couldn't deny. One afternoon, after a long meeting with Mark and the executive team, Sarah found herself reflecting on how far she had come. She sat at her desk, absent-mindedly tapping a pen against her notebook, staring out the window at the city below. The world seemed so vast now, full of possibilities. She was no longer the same person who had hesitated to take a chance. She had taken that leap, and it had paid off. But as she sat there, something in the back of her mind lingered. She had always been driven by the idea of proving herself, of showing that she was more than just what people saw on the surface. And in some ways, she had done that. But there was another question that now took root. What was next? She had achieved more than she had ever thought possible, but what would truly fulfill her? Was it enough to just rise through the ranks, or was there something more she needed to pursue? Mark's voice interrupted her thoughts, pulling her back into the present. "Sarah," he said as he walked into her office, "we need to talk." He seemed serious, and Sarah couldn't help but feel a flicker of unease. "Sure, Mark," she replied, straightening up in her chair. "What's on your mind?" Mark sat down across from her, his usual confident demeanor replaced by a more contemplative look. "You've been doing exceptional work," he said, his voice calm but direct. "But I think it's time for you to take on a new challenge." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. A new challenge? She had already been through so much in the past few months. She had proven herself, hadn't she? "I've been thinking about how to push you further," Mark continued, "and I think you're ready for a bigger role. Something with more responsibility, more influence." Sarah blinked in surprise. She had always known that Mark saw potential in her, but this was different. He was talking about something that would require even more of her. "What kind of role are you talking about?" she asked, her voice steady but curious. Mark leaned forward, his eyes locked onto hers. "I want you to head up a new division. Something that will be at the forefront of the company's future. It's not going to be easy, and it's going to require a lot of work, but I believe you're the right person for it." Sarah felt a surge of excitement, mixed with anxiety. A new division? It was everything she had ever dreamed of, but it was also the kind of challenge that could make or break her. "Are you sure I'm ready for that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark's smile returned, the same one that had encouraged her from the very beginning. "You've already proven you're ready, Sarah. This is just the next step. I believe in you." The weight of his words hit her hard. She had been given a chance to lead, to truly make a difference, and it was a responsibility she couldn't take lightly. As Mark left her office, Sarah sat in stunned silence, the weight of the decision sinking in. She knew this was her moment, her chance to truly step into her power and take her career to places she had never imagined. She had already come so far, and now, the world was truly at her feet. She wasn't just the girl who had worked as a waitress anymore. She was someone with the potential to shape the future. And with that realization, Sarah knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same again. The weeks that followed Sarah's promotion were a whirlwind. She had stepped into her new role with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, unsure of what to expect but determined to succeed. Leading a new division wasn't easy. There were long hours, countless meetings, and moments when she doubted herself. But with every challenge, Sarah found herself growing more confident. The team she had inherited was a mix of seasoned professionals and eager newcomers, and she quickly earned their respect with her calm demeanor, sharp intellect, and unwavering dedication. She learned to navigate the intricacies of managing people, balancing the needs of her team with the demands of the company. Mark had been right, this was exactly what she needed. The pressure pushed her to think creatively, to find innovative solutions, and to trust her instincts. It was exhilarating, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. But as much as she thrived in her professional life, there was a part of her that still struggled with balancing work and her personal life. She had been so focused on her career that she had neglected her relationships. One evening, after a particularly intense day, Sarah sat alone in her apartment, staring out the window at the city lights. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen. It was a message from her old friend, Emily. "How's everything going?" the message read. Sarah smiled as she typed a quick response. "Busy but good. Really good, actually." Emily had been one of Sarah's closest friends when she was still working as a waitress, and they had kept in touch, though not as often as they used to. She had always been supportive of Sarah's dreams, even when Sarah herself had doubted whether they were possible. "I've been meaning to ask," Emily continued in the next message. "Have you had time for yourself lately?" Sarah hesitated, staring at the message for a moment before responding. "Not really. Between work and everything else, it's been hard to find time." Emily's reply came almost immediately. "You need to take care of yourself too, Sarah. You've worked so hard to get where you are, but don't forget to live your life." Sarah felt a pang of guilt. She had become so focused on proving herself that she had neglected the simple joys of life, spending time with friends, taking a day off, enjoying the things that made her happy outside of work. She knew Emily was right, but it was hard to break the cycle she had gotten into. The next morning, as Sarah sat at her desk, she thought about Emily's words. She had worked so hard to get here, but at what cost? She had the career she had always dreamed of, but she had lost touch with the things that made her feel whole. Sarah decided then and there that she would make more time for herself. She would carve out moments for relaxation, for fun, for the things that truly brought her joy. It wouldn't be easy, but she knew it was necessary. She had worked hard to get to this point, but now, she needed to learn how to enjoy it. The following weekend, Sarah took a break from her usual routine. She spent the day with Emily, catching up on old memories, laughing, and enjoying the simple pleasures of life. It was a reminder that, while work was important, it wasn't everything. As Sarah walked back to her apartment that evening, she felt lighter, more at peace. She had learned a valuable lesson. Success wasn't just about climbing the corporate ladder. It was about finding balance, about enjoying the journey, and remembering to appreciate the things that truly mattered. Sarah was ready to embrace the next chapter of her life, not just as a successful professional, but as someone who knew how to live fully, with passion and purpose. As Sarah settled into her new routine, balancing her demanding career with personal moments of peace, she found herself increasingly confident in the path she had chosen. Her new division was flourishing under her leadership, and the company's growth was a direct reflection of her hard work and dedication. Mark's faith in her had been the spark she needed to ignite her full potential, but it was her own determination that had driven her to excel. Yet, there was still a part of Sarah that questioned her place in this world. Despite the accolades, the successful projects, and the respect she had earned, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. It wasn't that she wasn't grateful for everything she had achieved. She was. But as the days passed, she realized that the void she had once filled with ambition now felt like a quiet longing for something deeper. One evening, as Sarah walked through the city streets, the familiar hum of the busy city surrounding her, she paused for a moment and looked up at the towering buildings around her. The lights reflected off the glass and steel, a symbol of all she had accomplished. But in that moment, it felt empty. She had achieved the success she had always dreamed of, but she hadn't yet figured out what it meant to truly be fulfilled. The following day, Sarah sat down with Mark to discuss the progress of the division. As they went over the numbers and upcoming plans, she found herself distracted by the questions swirling in her mind. When the meeting ended, Mark looked at her thoughtfully. "You're doing great, Sarah," he said, his voice warm but perceptive. "But I can tell there's something on your mind." Sarah hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I feel like I've achieved everything I set out to do, but it's not enough. I thought this was the end goal, but I'm starting to realize that maybe it's not." Mark nodded, his expression understanding. "It's normal to feel that way," he said. "Success can be fulfilling, but it's not the only thing that gives life meaning. You've built something incredible, but what do you want to build for yourself now?" His words struck a chord with Sarah. She had spent so much time building her career, proving herself, that she had neglected to think about what would truly make her happy in the long run. "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "I've never really thought about it. I've always been focused on the next step, the next project, the next promotion. But I think I'm starting to realize that there's more to life than just that." Mark gave her a reassuring smile. "That's a big realization, Sarah. And it's okay to take a step back and think about what's next. You don't have to have all the answers right now. But the fact that you're asking yourself these questions shows that you're ready for the next phase." That night, as Sarah lay in bed, she reflected on Mark's words. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to sit with the uncertainty, to embrace the idea that life wasn't just about what she had accomplished, but about what she wanted to create for herself moving forward. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a sense of clarity. She didn't need to have all the answers, but she knew one thing for sure: she was ready to embrace the unknown. She had spent years chasing external validation, but now, she was ready to chase what truly mattered to her. It wasn't about climbing higher or proving herself anymore. It was about living a life that felt authentic, where success was measured not by titles or accomplishments, but by the contentment she felt in her heart. As Sarah walked into the office that day, she felt lighter. She was no longer burdened by the pressure to constantly achieve. She was focused on the journey ahead, ready to create something meaningful, not just in her career, but in every aspect of her life. She had come so far, and now, she was ready to define her own path. The future was hers to shape, not just through the work she did, but through the life she chose to live.